Okay, so what I want to talk about is creating levels and also creating little level instances. So very similar to what we did in Godot, where we had like a main level and then we had little components that we could add into the level. Doing that in Unreal is very, very similar. It's a little bit different, but it's a similar process. And it's going to give us a lot more, it's going to make it really a lot easier to build a level more quickly than just kind of creating each individual component one at a time. So it's not exactly like making like a tile set like we did in Godot, but it's kind of in that direction. But we also want to talk about how to create levels and where to put our content and stuff like that as well. For now, I'm just going to be using some of the default elements. In the second part of class, I'll go over how to download some 3D models and add them into your game. So right now I have the sort of default map open, which I've just been like playing around with. But what I actually want to do now is start creating my own maps or levels. In Unreal, there's different terms for different files, but map and level are roughly equivalent. Sometimes they also call it like staging, because sometimes Unreal is just used for video effects and not for games. But we can think of maps and levels as being roughly the same thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own level and save it into like my own content folder so I can start to actually kind of like build out my own project. If you've really made a lot of progress just modifying the demo level, that's fine. You can keep working with it, but I'm just going to go over the process for creating your own level. If you do keep working with the demo level, it might be good to just point out where that is before we start making our own folders and stuff. So if we look at our content drawer, all of our content has been imported from other sources like the standard assets or these default templates. And in the first person standard template, there is a bunch of stuff in here, some blueprints, which are like code, some input, which is like the first person controller, and then some maps. And here in the maps, we see the first person map that we've been editing. So that's where it is. You can make a copy of that and make changes to it, or you can duplicate it, make other levels, whatever you want. But when I'm making my own maps, what I want to do is create my own folder. So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to New Level. So I'm going to start with a new level, and they give us a few options. You can have a completely empty level with nothing in it over here. You can have a basic level that just has like a floor and a player and some lighting and stuff. You can have empty open world or an open world. So basic is probably the easiest one to get started with. You could kind of play around with those different ones, but basic is going to give us a lot of stuff off the bat that we don't really have time to learn about in this semester. So let's create a basic level. So now we have a new level. You can see the file is untitled, but we can see there's already some stuff in here. There's some lighting. So we have a directional light, which is our main light source. We have some fog. We have a sky atmosphere, a skylight, the sky sphere, which actually is what the sky is painted on, and then some clouds. And you might want to get rid of that some stuff. You might want to leave it in there. Then we have this one cube that is the floor. And then we have our player object that we're going to control in the game. So we're going to make some modifications here. Let's save this first. So I'm going to go to File and Save Current Level. And so now we're going to get to create our own file structure. So let's look at these folders for a second. So everything in our content folder is stuff that we've imported, as I mentioned. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it my levels. And I'll open this up, and I'll just call this level 1. And I'm not allowed to use spaces, so I'll call it level _1. And then I'll save it. Okay, so now I know where this is. It's in my content, in my levels, and I have level 1. We're probably not going to make more than one level, so this may seem like over organization, but I think it'll be useful. So let's close this again. And what I'm going to do is just start building out a little bit of a level. And so I'll kind of talk about how I start to build stuff out. And we'll start to create some components. And one of the main things we want to do is talk about creating reusable components. So I'm just going to delete the floor. And I'm going to create a starting sort of area for the player. So to do that, I'm going to go to my content drawer and go to level prototyping and go to meshes. So these kind of like basic 4 meshes are pretty useful for creating a little level. Obviously you can use other stuff, but I'm going to start with these guys. And I'm just going to add a cube into the scene. And so here's my cube. And I'm going to rename this cube. I'm going to call it floor. So I'm going to kind of recreate the floor. And then I'm going to just position it in the scene. So I'm going to open up the details down here and go to the transform. And when I drag it into the scene, it's just going to have this kind of like random location based on where I drag. And it's not really near the player or doing anything useful. So let's just reset those values. So I can just click on that little reset button and it'll just zero out all of those location values. So here we see the transform, here's location, and we can just reset that. And then we actually want to kind of move it down a little bit so that our player will not be right on top of it. So let's go into this view, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit over here and just move it kind of into place. And I have snapping turned on. So you can see when I move the cube, it snaps. And it snaps in increments of 10. So that's good for kind of getting it positioned. But now if I want to make more of a floor, I'm going to center this a little bit. So let's duplicate this cube. So I'm going to hit Control D. So now I have floor 2. And if I snap on 10, you can see that it's, it's kind of off by 10. Okay, so that's not super useful. So let's undo that. And let's change the snap to 50. And now, instead of duplicating, I'm just going to hold Option and grab this cube. Now see what happens when I have the snap at 50. I move in larger chunks, and so I can position the cube right next to the other cube. I'm going to undo that again, and now I'm going to change the snap to 100. So the cube is actually 100 units in size. So now if I hold Option and drag this cube out, I can just add these cubes right next to each other. So we see there's a little weird glitchy stuff going on. Let's turn off snap for a second, and I'm going to put this cube on top of this other cube. If we have our objects on top of each other when we're doing 3D rendering, what happens is there's this thing called Z fighting. That's when these objects are like occupying the same space, and so the renderer doesn't know which one to render, and so it's rendering both of them at different frames. That you'll notice that, especially when you're just getting started. That just, if you have stuff that's not really precisely aligned, you're going to see that. It's not the end of the world, but you may want to avoid it. Okay, so now I've got. All right, let's redo that. Okay, so now I've got these 3 floor guys. I can click all 3 of those guys, and then I can hold Option and grab this guy. I had snapping turned off, so let's undo that, turn snapping back on. I'm gonna hold Option and grab this guy, and then I'm gonna do it again. And now I've got a little 9x9 nice little floor, and I can start to actually, kind of think about how do I want to design this level. So let's play the scene. Okay, so I'm on this floor. It's pretty small, so maybe I want to make it a little bit bigger. But it's a decent starting point. So let's get out of here, and let's make my starting cube a little bit bigger, but then I'm going to redo the same whole process. So I'm going to grab this floor, I'm going to delete all those guys, and let's make our starting cube larger. so that we don't have to make so many cubes. So I'm gonna take the scale, and on the X scale, let's do like maybe 6. And on the Y scale, let's do 6. Okay, now we have a nice big cube. 6 might be too big. Let's do 3. I don't want to go crazy. And then I'll leave Z as 1. We don't really need it to be much wider than that. Okay, so now I can do the same process. So I'm going to hold Option and add one of these guys. And do that. And then I'm going to grab all 3 of these guys. So I'm going to the outliner, and I'm clicking on one and holding Shift and grabbing the rest. And then I'm holding Option again, and I'm dragging this out, and I'm going to go this the other way. Okay, now I have a nice big floor to work with. Okay, so this will be kind of my starting point. Okay. So I've got my floor. There's a lot of stuff in here, so let's make a folder for this. So I'm going to make a floor folder, and I'm going to throw all these guys in there. Okay. And now I'm going to make some walls. So I need a slightly different shape for the walls. You may be tempted to take one of your floors and, move it over here, and then go to rotate and rotate it up like this. And then move it back like that. You may be tempted to do that. I don't really recommend doing that, and I'll show you why. Because now we have a rotated object, and when we go to make changes to that object, it's going to change based on the rotation. So right now, if I scale, let's say I scale X again, instead of 3, let's say I want 6, it's scaled up. So we think of X as this kind of red arrow here, but now, because I've rotated that object, the object X is this red arrow here. So we didn't really talk about this very much, but each one of our objects has a local and a world transform. So the world transform shows us the X of the world, which is this red direction. The local transform is now pointing upwards. So that's not the end of the world. You may be fine with that, but you'll have to toggle between this a lot more if you're doing rotations like that. So instead of rotating our wall, let's rename this guy wall. Okay, and instead of Okay, instead of rotating our wall, let's just change the scale. So let's set the X back to 1, and now let's set the Z to 3. Okay, so now we have a little wall, and we can drag that right there. And let's see. Okay, that looks pretty good. I don't know if I want that to be taller, but let's just make a few of these. So I'm holding Option. I'm just going to drag a few of these out, and then I'm going to play the game and see if this size looks good. So it's a little taller than my player, but I can't jump over it, so maybe that's good enough for right now. So I'll hit escape to get out of here. Okay, so I have a little wall, so that's good. And now I'm going to grab these 3 wall instances, and I'm going to hold Option and then drag a wall over here. Okay, great. So same thing, I don't want to rotate. So you might say, okay, I'm going to make another one of these guys, and then I'm going to rotate around like that. Again, I'm going to run into the same issue where my local and my world space don't line up. So instead of doing that, let's just grab one of our walls, and I'm going to hold Option and drag it over here. And now I'm just going to change the scale again. So I'm going to set the X scale back to 3, and I'll set the Y scale to 1. Okay, now I'll move this guy over here. Oops. So I'll move this guy over here and then go line it up over here. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's hold Option. I'm going to drag this guy out. And we're going to close up this thing over here. It's not quite aligned over here, so based on the way that we set this up, we have like an extra little thing here. Sometimes planning in advance is a good idea, but I'm just gonna take this one wall and I'm just gonna set the this X to 2 instead of 3. Okay, now we've got our walls. And now I'm going to grab all 3 of these guys, or actually 4 of these guys. I'm gonna hold Option and I'm gonna throw this over here. Okay, so now I've got a room. And the cool thing about this room is that there's a lot of things that I can change about it. So that's going to be the second step of my process. So your process doesn't have to look exactly like this, but this is kind of how I like to get started, where I have like some base components that I can modify and then try to fit them together in different ways. Okay, so this leads us to our next thing that we're going to do. So I have this floor here, and if I want to make more of these little rooms, let's select. So if I want to make another room like this, I can't duplicate this floor folder. I could have done that. If I was working in Godot, you could do something like that with the Godot nodes. In Unreal, we can't do that. So instead of doing that, what we can do is make a little mini level. That's sort of like making a Godot component. So what I can do is I can right click on my floor. I can go to select all descendants or immediate children. And then I can right click on here and I can go to level and then create level instance. So this is gonna make a file that remembers all those things that I can go edit and then I can make copies of. So I don't have to make like a million of these. So I can go to create level instance. All of this stuff is fine. I'm gonna hit OK, and it's gonna bring up my, my file system. So now what I wanna do is inside my levels, I'm gonna make another folder because I might have a lot of these. And I'm just gonna call this my rooms folder. So I'll put different rooms in here. So I'll open this up and I'll call this default room. And I'll say save. Okay. So my default room now is its own little component. And so I can actually duplicate the whole room. I can make 2 rooms. And the other thing that is nice about this is with my default room, there's no way to get out right now, right? I didn't actually design it that well because there's like a 1 unit off, but that's okay. What I can do now is, this is kind of like what we talked about with materials before. If I make edits to this instance of the room, I can do that. I can like look at the hierarchy and I can say, whatever. I can change the room, but if I want to make a separate room that's a little bit different, what I can do is actually duplicate the file that I created. So I can click on the room. I keep accidentally moving this. Let's go to general. Or no, where do I? Actor. Okay, I can edit the level here, but that's not actually what I want to do. I guess there's no button to find this. Okay, so we'll just have to find it in our content drawer. So in our content drawer, in our levels, in our rooms, we now have this default room. So if I duplicate this room like I did with my material, I can make some changes to it. So I'm gonna duplicate this room and I'll call this room with door 1. I'm gonna have a few of these. And then if I open this guy up, oh, my thing is doing something weird. Okay, let's go back to... Okay, let's go back to my level. Okay, So I've got my default room. Let's add a room with door 1. Okay, and let's set the position next to the other room. So let's move over here. And let's move this guy down and over. Okay, so now room with door 1. Now I can edit this. If I go to edit, now I'm just looking at room with door 1. So I'm inside this instance. And so I can go in here and I can just delete this wall right here. And now I've got a little door. Or actually, I don't want to delete this because I need some floor. So let's undo that. Let's take this guy here. And let's set the Z scale to 1. Okay, so now I have a little door. Let's use this one because it's in the middle. That'll be better. Okay, so now we have a little room with a door. And we can, put rooms next to each other. So let's actually give this room a couple doors. I keep accidentally getting into these menus that won't let me get out of them. Okay. So let's go down here, set this Z to 1. I don't know why this menu is open. Go away. Okay. So now we need to get out of room with door 1. So let's go back to our level. So I'll click exit down here. Okay, so now I have room with door 1. And so let's get rid of room for a second. And let's move room with door 1 into our player area. And then we can make another one. So I'll just duplicate this. And now we've got 2 rooms that have doors. And so now I can go from here to here. And now maybe I can add like a ramp, or I can add, more doors, or I can add a room that has, a door on the side rather than in front. So that's the basic idea. The components don't have to necessarily fit together in this way, but the main point is that when you create a component, you can make it into sort of a blueprint where you can make multiple copies of it, and then you can reuse it, and it's much more, you can start to build out the level a lot faster than imagine if I placed each one of these cubes one after the other, and then just had to do it all over again. That would get really, really tedious, really fast, and I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is build a level that actually is fun to play and involves, some progression and stuff like that. So that's all the technical details I want to go over right now. In the second part of class, what I want to do is go over how to get a 3D model from somewhere on the internet and get it into the game. It's not really that hard. But I do want to go over that process. So you'll be able to add stuff in there that's not just in the default packs. And then I also want to talk about lighting for 2 seconds, just because we don't have a lot of time to talk about it. But if depending on what kind of scene you're making, you may want to add some lights in different places. So we'll go over that as well. Anyway, I'm going to stop here for now. And we'll have some workshop time. And then we'll do some more demo at 4.